afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Lunch and Learn with President Nygren. Thank you, everybody who is following us today on the social medias. We're excited to provide this presentation. Today, we are going to be focusing on the upcoming Arizona primary. So as some of you may know, the Arizona primary was moved up till July this year by an action of the state legislature. So in order to kind of raise awareness of the state change and also to provide voters information to have a successful primary day, we're having this awesome lunch and learn with some great guests. So as you may or may not know me from previous lunch and learns, my name is Catherine Belzowski. I am the Assistant Attorney General for the Economic Community Development Unit at the Navajo Nation Department of Justice, which is currently led by our Attorney General, Ethel Branch, and Deputy Attorney General, Heather Claw. And we are very lucky to have the support both of our from our DOJ leadership and from President Nygren on these great voting issues. If you've watched Lunch and Learns in the past, you may have attended some of our previous voting issue Lunch and Learns on voter registration. And so in kind of the spirit of continuing to provide information to Navajo voters on how to vote in Arizona elections, because I will say we have primarily focused on Arizona elections because they are the most complex of our 3 state elections. Our New Mexico and Utah elections are a lot simpler. We do hope, I will say, for our New Mexico, Utah voters who may be watching, we do plan on having a lunch and learn focused on those states so that you guys also have an opportunity to receive information on how to have a good election day in the upcoming November elections. But because of the massive complexity and historical issues of voting that we've had in Arizona, we really want to try to make sure that we're providing sufficient information to our Arizona voters and good roadmaps and a chance for you guys to get your questions answered on what is not at all an easy, intuitive process. So today I'll just give some brief introductions to some of the great presenters we have with us today. We are going to have Miss Natalia Sells, recent law grad from ASU, who will be providing an overview just on, the importance of Native voting in Arizona and kind of a history of it. And then we have 2 election directors, one from Coconino County and one from Navajo County, who will be discussing some more of the practical nuts and bolts of actually voting in the upcoming primary election and just some tips and tricks to having a successful primary day voting experience. So we're really happy to have all of these guests join us on this today's Lunch and Learn. So what I'd like to do now is I would like to turn the floor over to our first presenter, Miss Natalia Sells, and let her present away. Thanks, Natalia.
Awesome. Thank you, Catherine. Like Catherine said, my name is Natalia Sells. I am Guzatlane, born for the Nesheshe, Toyachini Dashuche, Kia'ani Dashanele. I am also originally from the communities of Tisnas Pass, Arizona, and Shiprock, New Mexico. And like Catherine said, I am a recent grad. I just earned my JD from ASU Law here in Phoenix, Arizona, and I also received a certificate in Indian law. And so part of earning the certificate there, I was a part of our Indian Legal Clinic. And one of the projects that the Indian Legal Clinic does is Native Vote. So we created this presentation that kind of brainstormed why voting is important. And so we can go ahead and bring the presentation up. So one of the reasons why we came up with this presentation was because we were hearing a lot about people saying that they didn't understand the reason why they should vote. They didn't feel like it was that important. And then when you look on the TV screens on election day, it doesn't always feel like you're a part of that. But then when you really look at the grand scheme of things, your vote really is important, and partaking in these elections is very important, not just for exercising a fundamental right, but also for helping your community and being able to have a voice in these different and how things are going to be run. So with that, I'll go ahead and so one of the things that we wanted to do is just kind of brainstorm a couple reasons why you feel voting is important, just to kind of get in that headspace as we delve into the presentation. So why do you think voting is important? But also maybe even, I guess, why you feel not enough people vote, and just kind of to kind of get like the juices flowing as we delve in. So just to kind of provide a brief history of Native voting rights, especially here in Arizona. Catherine kind of alluded to like how it's a little different here in Arizona, but also when you really look at the history, Arizona has had a big role in Natives being able to vote. And one of the big things is when you look at like the Indian Citizenship Act that we just celebrated 100 years since its enaction. And one would think when you are granted the right as a citizen, that with that carries the right to vote. However, Natives have had many, many challenges against that right. And it's a challenge that has persisted for centuries, a century essentially. And this has come in the form of either putting in restrictions or states saying that Native Americans can't vote. And so it was really a big process. But I think one of the things that we really have to look at with the Indian Citizenship Act was that that came about because of how many Natives were serving in the military. So when we really look at it, there was a lot, the right to vote was definitely a fight that a lot of sacrifice was made for us to have that right, and it has continued throughout history essentially. So we just kind of put in some different bullet points here. So we have the Supreme Court case in 1928. You have until 1948 when here in Arizona that Native Americans were allowed to vote. And then you have the Voting Rights Act that restricted people from voting on the basis of race, prohibits restricting people from voting on the basis of race. And then you have up until 1970, Arizona required an English literacy test before registering to vote. However, you kind of still see to this day some hurdles that come with being able to vote, especially out here in Navajo. So just to brainstorm some reasons as we delve in why it's important to vote. Your vote determines who is going to be in office for the state and federal government. State legislators and elected members of Congress enact laws that impact tribes directly and indirectly. And then in addition, those in power can appoint other people to oversee different areas such as land, resources, funding, and these all have different impacts on how tribal issues are handled, as well as our rights as well. So as we've seen with previous elections recently, the Native vote can flip seats. And once we flip those seats, it's also amazing to see how much more attention can kind of get placed on tribal members and communities, as well as tribal issues, and how we're starting to see these things come to light in different initiatives with not just the federal government, but also the state government. So one of the important things about voting is that it helps get Natives seat at the table in making these important decisions and taking action, because it's not just electing other representatives to represent our issues, it's also electing tribal members and Natives also to these seats to have those positions of power as well. So we just kind of broke it down into some areas, and then we'll go through each of them as well. So we have how your vote can impact these different areas. So those include the protection of sacred rights, education, healthcare, economic development, infrastructure, and representation. So when we look at protection of sacred sites, we kind of place two scenarios here. So you have the issue, you have the Bears Ears story, where you have different presidential administrations who have changed the boundaries of national monuments, such as like Bears Ears. You had, for example, President Obama, who designated Bears Ears as a national monument. Then you had President Trump and his administration actually reduced the size of it. And then you had President Biden come in and expand it larger than how President Obama initially enacted it. So you see how sensitive these national monuments are, and how a lot of these national monuments are also kind of established in partnership with tribes too. And so when you look at how sensitive those things can be changed depending on the administrations, that's an important thing to think about when you go into vote as well. Then you also have, for example, the issue with Oka plats that's happening right now, where you had an Arizona senator who added the transfer of land to a private company, and it got approved by Congress. And Congress are people that we elect into those positions. Then you also had the state legislators as well who opposed it. And so you can kind of see how it continues to be, the case continues to be ongoing as the different administrations come in, different people. But you also see as well, once again, how important it is to vote in people who understand why these places are sacred, why they're important, and why we need to protect them. Because ultimately, it's these people that we elect in who are going to make these decisions of whether or not we should protect it or whether or not we should destroy it for mining purposes, as an example. So that's why exercising your right to vote can have an impact on protecting these sacred rights or these sacred sites. So I just kind of like labeled a couple of examples. So we have these different federal laws that Congress has passed that have aimed to protect, but also repatriate a lot of these sites and cultural items as well. And once again, these are members of Congress passed these laws, and we, the people, are the ones who elect them in. And so by voting, you can have a hand in determining who's going to enact these laws, but also letting them know that these are things that we find important. Next category is education. As we have just wrapped up education, our graduation ceremonies for this past semester. And as Catherine said, I'm also a recent grad as well. And one of the biggest things that I found very important in my graduation was wearing my cultural regalia and also the eagle plume that I've worn in all my graduation ceremonies. However, it's not one of the things that graduation season tends to bring is when we see Native students in our own communities and also elsewhere being denied the right to wear either their eagle feather or their tribal regalia at their graduations. And one of the things that is important is that here in Arizona, a state law was passed, which prohibits Arizona schools from keeping Native students from wearing their regalia at graduation. And that's actually a state right that members of the state legislature that Arizona elected into those positions passed to protect Native students. And so when you have a law that gets implemented like that, you have those extra protections and being able to exercise that it's now a protected right that you can exercise. However, when you look at other states, you don't always see that. And then you have these stories that come up and these issues. So one of the things that's important about voting is that it has its hand in enacting legislation that can be able to protect Native students and their identities. But you also see how when you vote in people, that they can be able to partner with tribes And one of those include administrating grants to help Native students, or partnering with tribal colleges with dual enrollment programs. But you also see that it's Arizona elected officials who determine the tuition here in the state as well, and determine the curriculum that students need to take to earn their high school diploma, but also to fulfill certain requirements for going to college. So one of those is, like, for example, the Arizona Board of Regents allows Native languages to fulfill the language requirement for admission into an Arizona university. Now, these are all legislation that was passed by, once again, people we elected into these positions. By exercising that right to vote, you can have in hand also in making sure that these are things that people are aware of and that we can be able to protect. Another area that's important for voting is economic development. We do have a lot of gaming here in Arizona. And so gaming is something that is regulated both between the state, the tribe, and the federal government, all of which it's very important to have that continuing relationship with all three sovereigns to be able to prioritize economic development. So it's important to elect people in the state and federal and tribal governments who understand how important these different areas are for economic development needs in Indian country. So once again, your vote has a hand in how these relationships continue to either grow or become hindered. So that's one of the important things about exercising that right to vote once again. Another area that's important for voting is infrastructure. So federal revenue is needed for a lot of federal projects here on the Navajo Nation. This includes such as like internet access to tribal communities, housing infrastructure development, energy and utility projects. So there are these different initiatives that happen with like the state and federal government, and that revenue is important in being able to develop those things in Indian country and on the tribe. So when you elect people, so Congress every year determines how much revenue or how much to allocate to these different projects. So if you elect people into those positions, if you're voting for people who understand the need for these, you're exercising that right. Another big area that your vote has an impact on is healthcare. So once again, the federal government, so people that we elect into these positions, decide how much funding to allocate for important health services such as IHS. But one of the biggest things that we can look back on is the CARES Act, which provided a lot of COVID relief funding for tribes, and especially here with Navajo Nation as well. I know that one of the things that we needed a lot during that period was resources. And so Congress, recognizing that, that tribes needed help, allowed for tribes to be able to receive the amount of funding that we did to help combat COVID. So when you're electing people, you want to make sure that they understand that things are different in tribal communities, or there are certain things that we need additional help with. So you want to make sure that your voice is being heard. And so when things like this happen, they be able to recognize that, we need to focus on this. In addition, elected officials also can call for investigations on issues that are impacting tribes. So one of those include, as we've seen recently with the scouting of natives for fake sobriety facilities or the Medicaid fraud of tribal members. Arizona elected officials have partnered with tribes to be able to investigate those things. So once again, you want to elect people into these positions who recognize that these are issues that are important and that need that they could partner with tribes too. And one of the big areas that I really wanted to focus on for why voting is important is the topic of representation. It's no secret that Natives have been underrepresented in a variety of areas. However, when you exercise that right to vote, you're also giving us a seat at that table. And you see this in historic landmarks such as such as Deb Haaland or Sharice Davids being elected to Congress. That was something that has only happened in the past couple of years. But you get to see when you exercise that right to vote, you not only get tribal issues at the table, you get tribal members themselves at the table making these decisions, making these historic having these historic moments. And then you also get to see tribes consulted more with initiatives and issues that are affecting our own communities. You see tribal consultation in the form of federal projects or when different legislation goes up to Congress and us being able to have a hand in those. But you also get to see committee appointments. For example, Deb Haaland being appointed as the Secretary of Interior and being able to oversee a federal agency that has had an important role in tribes and tribal governments. And then you also see different tribal members being appointed to different judicial appointments. You see federal judges. You have, for example, Judge Himetawa here in Arizona, District Court of Arizona. These were things that at one point seemed unprecedented. But by people exercising their rights to vote, we've slowly been able to see this progress and this change. And we get to see ourselves in these roles. And then we also, not only that, but get to call attention and pass legislation and investigations that call a lot of this, put the tribal issues at the forefront. One of the things that Deb Haaland has done has been focusing a lot on cultural sites and sacred sites, but also calling for an investigation into the boarding school era. Now, a lot of this stuff, I honestly would say 10 years ago, I didn't think would be possible, but by people voting in and voicing these concerns, and once again, exercising that right to vote, we're starting to see a lot of these changes happening, and we're starting to see Natives at the forefront of these. But of course, a lot of this wouldn't have been possible unless people exercised that right to vote and said, I want this person to represent me, or these are the issues I find important, and calling these things, bringing it to the forefront and calling it out. And your vote is important in being able to see this representation. So once again, I close it out with why your vote matters. So the big one is voting gets Natives a seat at the table. And it's a seat at the table that we have not always been welcome to. But your vote can get us there, and being able to get these issues out there and making sure our communities, these issues that are impacting our communities, are being heard. By voting, you can be able to have a hand in that, and that's why it's important. And really, when you look at the history of voting, going back to the beginning of the presentation, the right to vote has been a very hard-fought right. And it started with our tribal members serving in the military during World War I for us to get the right to become citizens. And then after that, the many years of fights that advocates, tribal members have done to make sure that that right doesn't get hindered and that we can be able to exercise that freely like everyone else. And then looking forward now, you look at how far tribes have come since having that right to vote. You see people in Congress, you can see tribal members in Congress at the state and federal level. You see Natives leading federal agencies, but you also see them making decisions in the courtroom. So once again, your vote can accomplish so much more. And by exercising that right to vote, it's amazing to see how much more tribes can accomplish in the future if more people come out to vote, especially tribal members. And it's just not important for you, but it's also important for your community as well. So with that, I'm closing out with your vote really does matter in exercising that right.
Thank you, Natalia. I really appreciate your presentation. I get excited to vote every time I hear it, so thank you. And then I just wanted to kind of put you on the spot. My understanding is that you are going to be working in this voting rights area, correct, moving forward?
Yes, I am.
Great. Well, we are very excited to have you and continuing to work on these issues for Native Vote, and just really proud of you, and can't wait for you to become a leader in this area. And someday you will be leading these lunch and learns. So good luck. We just definitely wish you good luck moving forward. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah. So just kind of transition, we really appreciate Natalia's presentation on kind of why, voting in these elections is important. And now we wanted to talk to some of our representatives from the county election offices on how to vote, right? So now that Natalia has explained why this is an important thing for all Navajos to do, okay, well, how do I do it? So I am going to introduce we have two representatives from the counties. We have a representative from the Coconino County election office, and then we have a representative from the Navajo County election office. And I would like to allow them to kind of introduce themselves in their former titles. So I'll wait for them to jump on camera. Oh, here we go. Awesome. Thank you. So we'll start with our representative here from Coconino County. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Thank you. Yes, my name is Aslir Munsta. I'm the elections director for Coconino County, and we take voting. And thank you to you, Catherine, and the Department of Justice, the Navajo Nation, the Office of the President for extending this invitation, because we do take voting very seriously in Coconino County, and we're very proud of the improvements and the history of voting and access to the voters in our county. We have more than a quarter of our registered voters are Native, and we're very proud that we have not just the Navajo Nation as part of our voter group, but also the Hopi and Havasupai and Paiute tribe members that actively participate in our election. So I want to say thank you, and I'm looking forward to this next few minutes with sharing with you some of our preparation.
Thanks, Hustler. All right, and our representative for Navajo County, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Kristen Haddix. I'm the Navajo County Elections Coordinator. Raylene got called out last minute this morning, so she kind of passed this meeting off to me at the absolute last minute. So I hope I can contribute, certainly not as well as her, but hopefully I'll be able to help out. I'm super excited to get to do what I do. I just got back from doing poll worker training in Kayenta and Pinyon. So I got to go up to Monument Valley. It was absolutely breathtaking. I am grateful that I get to help absolutely every voter in Navajo County vote. So whatever I can do to help answer questions about that, I'm happy to do so.
Great. Well, thank you guys. We really appreciate you guys. We really appreciate you both taking the time to join us this morning/afternoon to talk about voting. So as we are aware, the primary date is coming up here in July. Our first time having a July primary date, I think, here in Arizona, and at least the years that I've lived here, for July 30th. And I do see that our Attorney General has joined us. So happy to have her. So I'll just, Attorney General, would you actually like to say a few words before we kind of get into this discussion?
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to say thank you to Natalia and folks we have here from the county, from Coconino and Navajo. And it would have been great to have Raylene, but hopefully she can come on at some future point. We really appreciate you guys taking time to get information out there to the voters and make sure that our Navajo voters have a successful primary day. And of course, appreciate all your help making sure that we have more access to our polling sites. You guys are certainly models for the counties that we have voting, state and federal voting happen in. So we really appreciate that, especially making sure to have voting centers available, not just precinct-based voting opportunities. That's super, super helpful in making sure that our voters don't have to travel additional distances to cast their polls or their ballots, rather. So really appreciate all the work that you guys do. And so I just wanted to say hello and thank you, and let Catherine get back to the good work that she's doing.
Thank you, AG. Really, again, really appreciate the support from our leadership on this, because it's, as my colleagues know, it's a lot. So, all right. So we were kind of hoping to hear from you experts at the county level, you know, with there's been a lot of changes recently in Arizona election law, and we just want to make sure that, you know, Navajo voters know what they need to do to make sure that their vote counts on primary day, which again, reemphasize July 30th. And I think that our Navajo voters are probably also aware that we changed the Navajo primary date to also July 30th. So just want to get that plug too to our Navajo elections, is that both Navajo elections and the county elections primaries will be held on July 30th this year. And the Navajo leaders made that change to hopefully encourage Navajo voters to vote in the state and federal primaries on the state. So Esler and Christine, I'll just kind of turn the floor over to you guys if you guys have some, top tips for our Navajo voters to make sure that they have a very smooth, easy experience come July 30th.
Sure. And absolutely. And thanks again, Catherine. And Christine and I, we can jump in and share some of the tips. But I wanted to also mention that the elections at the state in Arizona are managed at the county level. So a lot of the operations and a lot of the preparations are operations and administration processes that happen at the county level. So it's very important for people to understand that Arizona has 15 different counties. Those counties are the ones that manage and administer elections across the board. And Arizona has like a very robust system of checks and balances. Each county has a recorder's office as well as that is in charge of the voter registration and early voting processes. And then the Board of Supervisors is in charge of all the election day processes, and that includes setting up the polling places, making sure that election board workers are recruited and trained properly to serve the voters, and tabulation among some other responsibilities. So that a lot of the election administration happens at the county level, and with great partnership, of course, with the Secretary of State's office that is the lead organization. What's very important and was actually a good thing that the election primary date was moved a week earlier is the coinciding of both the Navajo Nation election primaries and the state of Arizona elections on the same date. Because when we were testifying and working through that process, we could compare data back from the early 90s and the early 2000s, where those dates were into two different days, and participation was less than when the state elections and the nation's primary elections are coincide and are on the same day. So that's a very helpful and good thing for the voters. One of the things that I wanted to start us off, and then maybe Kristen and I can do the top 10 or the top 5 important facts around election day preparation, is that for us, election day is not just about voting. We welcome and actively recruit election board workers, because they are the backbone of serving the voters on election day. Coconino County has 38 different polling locations. 13 of those are in Native communities. 12 are in chapters and co-located sometimes with the chapters in the in parts of the Navajo Nation that is in our county. But recruiting election board workers, and especially having them from those communities in which the voters are being served, is of very high importance and a great value, because we pride ourselves in having local people administer local elections. So like one of the top things I wanted to share with everybody is that we're still recruiting election board workers. It's a good civic responsibility and duty. We also have a stipend that's associated with that helps not properly acknowledge all the effort, but it's a token of appreciation for our election board workers. So that would be like the first one and the starting point as we start this conversation about important facts.
Can I add just a little bit to that?
Sure.
As we're recruiting poll workers, obviously we need all members of our election boards. But I've been really passing on the message to my poll workers that if they know anyone that is capable of doing interpreting, that we really need as many interpreters as we can possibly get going into November, especially looking at how many propositions we're going to have. I want to make sure we have absolutely enough interpreters so that the polls can run smoothly, that everyone's getting that interpretation needs met.
Absolutely, and that's very important. Like language access is not just a legal requirement, but it's something that both I know all of our counties in the north, including Apache County, like take very seriously, because that is it's the best way to provide access to voters on election day. One of the important things is for election day is to know that polling locations that are assigned to the voters, but also the hours. And in Arizona, the Navajo Nation and the state are on two different time zones, so that's a good reminder that polls open at local hours. So in the nation, they would open at 6 a.m. Local time, and they would close at 7 p.m. in the evening, or when the last voter is done with the voting process. One important element, and Catherine and the Attorney General also mentioned this in her comments, but our county, Coconino, employs a vote center model and also a precinct specific model, and kind of like a hybrid. We've increased the number of polling locations from 3 in the last election cycle in 2022 to 15 vote centers across the county, and we have increased that number to also in the areas that serve and have provided better access for the Navajo voters, in Page up north, in the middle of the county in Tuba City, as well as down south in the Loop chapter. So those 3 vote centers we're hoping that it would provide better access and flexibility for voters to vote where they are, not necessarily having to travel to a particular polling place and designated to vote. So we take that very seriously, and again, like the hours are 6 to 7 local time. And the information about polling places is listed both on our website as well as on myarizona.vote website too, and voters have several opportunities to check on that information as well. Kristen, do you want to take another kind of important preparation?
Yeah. So just to kind of what Aslir was talking about, we have 39 vote centers. 19 of them are on tribal communities. We have the Navajo and Hopi as well. We also have the White Mountain Apache reservation down in our South County. We are completely a vote center county. So every single one of our vote centers is open to any voter in Navajo County voting there. So we have total vote centers. I can't think of anything else right now.
Another point that it's also important to note in preparation, anticipation, and kind of like expectations for election day is the Arizona voter ID requirements. Like it's a driver's license for a voter is sufficient, but so is a tribal ID, and that's very important. And we've again trained our election board workers to process voters and help them cast their ballot on election day. One of the commonly asked questions that we get regarding ID on election day, and there are provisions in law for this, is what happens if the address on the license is different, like the PO box number is different from what we have on the voter registration. Does that cause issues? Does it cause problems? And again, things with PO boxes change quite a bit, so we are fully aware of that, but that should not impede the voter's right to cast a regular ballot as long as their name matches on the ID and the community that they live in matches with the current voter registration. So we have provisions in place, and those ID requirements of the polls are upheld, and the voters are given access to the correct ballot.
Oh, so
Catherine?
yeah, can I just ask? I just want to ask two follow-up questions to you guys. Can you guys just maybe talk a little bit about the difference between if someone is voting at a vote center versus someone is voting at a precinct, the different experience they may have?
Yeah, so I'll start and then Kristen jump in. But so the primary difference between a vote center for in our county versus a precinct specific is that we have pre-printed ballot at those precinct specific locations, and we do not have like the ability for somebody that is coming outside of the precinct to vote a paper ballot, which has been the traditional way of casting the ballot. At the vote center, we have what are called ballot on demand printers. That technology allows us to print the ballot on demand as the voter checks in and give them the correct ballot style, and so they can cast the ballot as a regular voter.
So for Navajo County, it works a little differently. We have the pre-printed traditional paper ballots for the voters that are in that local area. If a voter is voting from outside of their precinct, so if I wanted to vote in Kayenta, for example, on election day, my ballot would be available on our accessible voting device. So that's how we take care of those out of precinct voters. So all of our polling places are vote centers, and that's how we manage to give everyone the right ballot.
That's great. Thank you, guys. So, Christine, if you wanted to go to Kayenta, right, to vote, even though that's not your traditional voting, your precinct voting area, your ballot, you don't have, the county will just issue a regular ballot. It's not a provisional ballot.
Correct.
There's no additional documentation.
It won't be the traditional pre-printed ballot. It'll be from the accessible voting device, but it won't be a provisional. It'll be a regular ballot.
Great.
And that's also the case in Coconino County. So our language accessibility for our voters is done through what are called express votes, so the accessible voting equipment. And we had a very good experience with during the Navajo Voter Coalition conference that happened here in Flagstaff in June, when we had the voters are able to hear the ballot and have it narrated in Dene and listen to it and the prompts about casting that ballot in their language. The express vote, like the accessible voting equipment, does have all the different ballot styles, so that again provides the ability for the voters to get the right ballot and vote as a regular voter and get access to the correct ballot on election day.
Great. And then just to kind of follow up on the ID requirements, as you guys stated, it shouldn't be an issue, correct, if someone's like PO box doesn't match their voter registration. Is that right? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
So our poll pads, our precinct registers will have both physical and mailing, and my poll workers are trained to match one of them.
Okay, great. And then I think, you guys had provided some examples, like a driver's license, right, would be an acceptable form of ID. Does the identification have to have a photo on it?
So we work off of 3 lists. List 1 is a list that we only need one thing from. So that's going to be your Arizona State driver's license, your Arizona non-operating ID, your tribal identification, as long as it has a photo of the voter, a name and address that matches our information in our poll pad. You can also vote with non-photo IDs, but we need two forms of non-photo ID. So there's quite a list of things that they can use for that. Utility bills within 90 days of the election, a bank or a credit union statement, their vehicle registration, vehicle insurance cards, your tribal identification if it's missing something from list 1. So for example, the CIB that only has a name and a census number, they can use that, but we need something else to go with it from list 2. So a non-photo ID, we need 2 forms of ID. And then if you have a form of ID that, example I like to use is like a passport or a military ID. It has a name and a photo, but no address. So the voter can bring something with that address to match with that passport or military ID in order to vote a regular ballot.
So if I brought my passport and my utility bill, that would be sufficient.
Correct. Yeah, that'd be perfect. And I think it's good to point out that your voter registration card is on list 2 because it doesn't have a photo of you. And I think that that's a really honest mistake for a voter to make, to think that they can vote with their voter registration card. But because it does not have a photo, we need something else to go with it. My poll workers are trained to help them to come up with that second form of ID before they get shipped off to provisionals. So we're asking them, do you have your vehicle registration with you? Can you pull up your insurance card on your phone? So we're doing everything we can to try to help them get that additional ID before we ship them to provisional. But I think that's that's kind of a point for voters to have some confusion.
Thank you.
And in addition to that, like again, Arizona has some very solid election laws to provide access, and electronic forms of your driver's license and electronic forms of your voter registration cards are sufficient and meet those requirements for voters for ID on election day. And like the biggest challenge we have, like especially in some of the Native communities, is the lack of connectivity and service. But electronic forms of ID are also available and can be used on election day by voters as well.
Okay, so if I'm able to pull up like my car insurance app on my phone, if I'm able to pull up my car
or your driver's license,
yes,
I can
absolutely.
just provide that to the poll worker. Okay,
Yes.
Great. So I think you had some additional thoughts, right, on some things voters should take into consideration.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing too, the one that we try to communicate with like all of our voters is like get all the ballot information and do all the necessary research. Election days can be, depending on turnout, can be like there could be lines at the polls, so that is very important for people to know who's on the ballot, that make that plan about who they're voting for. Voters are able to bring in their sample ballot or information that they've researched at home. This primary election does not have as many statewide questions on the ballot, but come November, making a plan and knowing what those questions are and having some good ideas about how you want to vote would also help on election day to manage those lines and to have a good election day experience. So that's another thing I wanted to mention about ballot information and doing the research.
Okay. Christine, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I was actually I was reading the questions that were coming up about early ballots, so I was kind of preparing my answer for that. I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine. So let's just I think those are great. So let's talk about that. In addition to bringing some of your research to the polls, can you bring your mail-in ballot on election day to a polling location?
So yeah, so voters can, it's up to them. They can vote their ballot at home and put it in the envelope and then just drop it off at our voting location. But we also have the technology that if they would like to vote at the vote center on election day, but they got an early ballot in the mail, they can still vote a regular ballot without having to vote provisionally. So it's up to them, which, however that they prefer.
So let's say, Mail on the Nation is so, so great. It's top notch here. And it definitely does not take us a long time. But let's say to get mailings to you guys. But let's say, for example, I put in my mail-in ballot and I'm concerned that it's not going to reach you in time to be counted. Can I still go to my polling location on election day and vote?
Yeah, so we're going to be able to see, whether or not we've received that ballot and accepted it. If we have accepted it, we'll let the voter know and give them the opportunity to vote provisionally so we can make sure we're just counting one ballot per voter if it, indicates that they've already voted. Otherwise, we'll let them vote a regular ballot in the vote center.
Okay. And do I have to take my mail-in ballot to my designated precinct, or could or can I drop it off at any polling location?
Yeah, mail-in ballots, as long as they're sealed and in their original, signed and sealed in their original envelopes, can be dropped off at any of the polling locations or vote centers or ballot drop boxes that are up and running and operational until 7 p.m. on election day. That's very. That's a great way to access the early ballots are managed by the recorder's office, and I think I was looking at the date to see how long in advance is the suggested time frame, because mail travels quite a long ways and not always the most direct route, and it seems like it's the 22nd of July is the recommended mail-in ballot date to get to the counties on time. So that's again very, very important for people to have that information, that you can always drop off things at or your ballot at a drop box or a vote center, or mail it with far in advance to make sure that it gets here on time.
And I would just make a plug for Navajo voters who may be listening that I think a lot of our state partners will recommend 7 days to put a ballot in the mail, but we really push and try to get the message out that at least 10 days, just because of the nature of our mailing on the Navajo Nation. If you really want to, make sure it gets there, 10 days is a lot safer than 7. So that's just kind of a rule of thumb for, Navajo voters. And as an example, if you're a voter in Apache County, when you drop your ballot in the mailbox, it goes to Gallup, and then I'll go to Albuquerque, and then I'll go to Phoenix, and then I'll go to St. John, and then I'll go to, I think goes to Snowflake and then St. John, Holbrook maybe, and then St. John. So our ballots just happen to travel far, just the nature of the Postal Service out here. So again, 10 days. And if maybe you don't get it in those 10 days, if you're concerned about it, being counted, you can obviously go to a polling location and cast a ballot as well. So, and then just a friendly reminder for those mail-in ballots, and looking at my county colleagues here, right? They need to be signed and the signature needs to match. I think those are our two things. And there is time. So, right, I've seen lots of nods on that one. Make sure you sign those ballots before you drop them in. And, I know a lot of our community, we try to help. It's very helpful for our elder voters. And so just kind of two things on that. One, make sure you don't sign for your grandma. Grandma needs to sign. So make sure that happens. I will say we've had a lot of great experience with the counties that you guys do seem to make a lot of efforts, that if you think that, let's say I signed for my grandma and the signatures don't match, you guys usually do a pretty good job of trying to follow up with those voters, right? To correct that.
Yeah, I think there's just, again, very robust processes in place from our recorder's office of following up on if the signature does not match, or if there is any issue and need to follow up with the voters. And in Arizona, you can drop the ballot for a family member in the household that you live in, or if you're a caregiver for a voter, you can come in and drop that early ballot for that voter.
Mhm.
Just again, we want to make sure, and that's what we instructed the election board workers on at polling places, to make sure to check that the person has signed the affidavit on the outside of the envelope. That's very important. And again, having that one-on-one interactions with the voters, and we do have interpreters at polling locations in the Native communities that can explain and communicate directly with the voters on the needs for dropping off and making sure that the signature is on the ballot.
Mhm.
One of the other things that, sorry, Catherine,
go ahead.
one of the other things I want to also remind, that because of the change and the move of the primary date, early voting, which ends on Friday, July 26th, did get extended by 2 hours. So early voting, in-person early voting locations are open till 7 p.m. For on that Friday. So early voting got extended by a couple hours, and also emergency voting is available like over the weekend based on each county's decision too as well.
Great. Thank you. And then just a kind of follow up with grandma, if grandma wants to go vote in person, and I'm her, she needs assistance at the polls, can she have a family member go into the polling, help her vote, or how does that, what are the rules regarding that?
So any voter can bring whoever they want with them to vote. So a family member, they're allowed to go into the voting booth with them. They're allowed to help them vote. And on that same note, you can also bring your kids to watch you vote. So setting a good example and letting our kids watch us vote is also allowed.
Great. And then I just kind of wanted to reiterate too, because we're just getting close on time, but if there is a line on election day and the poll closes, like let's say 7 p.m. comes, but I'm still in line, do I still get the right to vote?
Yes, everyone in line at 7 o'clock gets to vote.
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely. And stay in line. You will get the chance to vote. The poll workers will communicate that with everybody that is in line before that 7 p.m. So don't get discouraged if there is like an issue or a long line. You still get the right to vote, and it's very important to cast that ballot and to make sure that the voices are heard. So
great. Well, I see our Attorney General has joined us again, so I will hand the mic over to her to kind of wrap us up here.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you guys so much. This was super helpful. Great refresher for me personally as well. Because the rules are often, changing, so it's always good to get a refresher. Some of the things I wanted to do was encourage people to have a plan. Go ahead and develop your plan now. Make sure your loved ones, your family members have a plan for how to cast their ballot, whether that's, via mail or ballot box, drop box with their mail-in ballot, or early voting in person or on election day. So there are lots of options that are there to make it possible for you to cast your vote. So make sure you have your plan locked in and you have transportation available, that your family and friends have transportation available. And then make sure to check out these websites. There are a lot of great resources on there for you. And then we have a number of links. We'll probably post them in the chat as well, so you guys have those. And then I think like the takeaways are that if you're going to vote on election day, you really need to make sure that you have both the proof that you are who you say you are, with a photo ID of some sort that has your name on it, and then also proof of residency to show that you currently live within that precinct or that county. So is that right, Kristen and Essler? Okay, great. Excellent. And then reminder, July 30th is the Arizona primary day. And I think those are the main points I wanted to make. And then for folks who are curious about the terminology, one of the things we've been saying is vote centers. Vote centers allow you to vote out of precinct. As long as you're voting in the right county, you can vote in a vote center, even though you don't live in that community or within that precinct. So that is super flexible. So like if you're going to Tuba City to do your laundry, you can go to the vote center in Tuba City, for example. Again, in Navajo County, all of the polling sites are vote centers, right, Kristen? So you have a lot of maximum flexibility in Navajo County to vote your ballot anywhere on election day. So, well, thank you guys so much for your presentations. This was super helpful. And we look forward to perusing your websites and anything we can do to help get out the information to make sure that folks have a positive experience on primary day. Please let us know. And thank you for all the hard work that you guys do. And thank you, Catherine, for leading this wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.